uh, start. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're enjoying the nice weather outside. So today I'll be talking about optimizing web page performance. Reason I picked this talk is because as a company, PhazeRo, we deliver different kinds of products to clients, and in a lot of cases, in many cases, they're web-based products, and so it's important for us to think about how to optimize um, performance for these products. And this purpose of this talk is just going to be just to get us thinking about it. We're not going to dive deep into how to optimize because it's a very large topic. However, it's just to get us thinking about it. So here is the outline of what we'll be discussing. Um, what do we mean when we're saying optimizing web page performance? And then we'll talk about why we should care about that. Thirdly, we're going to talk about three key areas we should think about when we're trying to improve the performance of our uh, web application. And finally, we'll open it up for questions. So, what do we mean by optimizing web page performance? What are we thinking about when we're doing that? One of the things we'll be thinking about is how fast your site loads. So, how fast the content appears to your users. And then another thing is how fast you're able to interact. So I'm sure we've all been in the case where there's content on the page, but you can't really click on anything or nothing's happening because things are loading in the background. And then finally, the memory, how much memory usage. Now, I know a lot of devices now are very powerful, but in many countries around the world, uh, the memory is limited, and so it's important we're not sending a giant document with a bunch of large files to our users. We need to be conscious of that. So this is what we're talking about when we're talking about optimizing web performance. When we're talking about web performance. So why should we care about this? Well, mainly when we're building our applications or our pages, we want people to you know, uh, to use them. So imagine we're building a shop for a client. Our clients wants people to stay on the page and actually buy, shop from it. And so let's try and understand our consumers a little bit more. And so I'll talk about that. I'll be using some quotes from this book called Usability Engineering. It's from 1993. And this is the first one. It says it takes zero point 0.1 seconds is the limit for having the user feel that the system is reacting instantaneously. So if you're within that limit, if your if your page loads within zero point 0.1 second or less seconds or less, then your user, you know, will feel like things are happening fine. You know, they're quick. And then the next threshold is 1 second. So as soon as you get to the 1 second mark, that's um, the limit where your user will actually notice that there's a delay. So you want to be between 0.1 second and 1 second. Of course, there's many. This is a much deeper topic, and so I'm just talking from a general standpoint where you want to be. Of course, there's ways where you can keep your user attention, but this is just kind of like a general rule. And then finally, 10 seconds, that's the limit for keeping the user's attention focus. Don't think that this 10 seconds means that you have 10 seconds room for your page to load. That's actually not the case. In many cases, I use this as an example from this book, but in many cases, what you have really is the time between 1 and 10. And I found cases where they say user retention is like 3 seconds. Found other cases where it's 6 seconds. So it's a short window and probably depends from person to person. I think a way for us to think about it is maybe, in a lot of our job is googling things, right? Searching for solutions for different things. And when you google something and you go, you'll go to the first link. If that link takes like I've noticed, if it takes more than 2 seconds to load, I'm closing it and I'm going to the next one. So we should think that way. That a lot of users, that's what they do. So performance is user experience, and I know in a lot of the cases we talk about user experience from the user interface standpoint. And while that is important, it's also important that the user actually uses our page. And if the performance is poor, that's poor user experience. If all that uh, is not convincing, then maybe money talk will be convincing for why we should care about this. And mainly, we talked about the time, and this time translates to money literally. Here are two examples that we have. In the first one, Amazon calculated that a page load slowdown of just 1 second could cost it 1.6 billion in sales each year. 1.6 billion from 1 second. So puts things a little bit in perspective. And then if we look at the second example here, Google, they calculated that slowing its search results by 4/10 of a second, so not even a second, they'll lose about 8 million searches per day, right? And if you think about it, Google has Google Ads, so every time you search, ads appear, and every time you go to pages, ads appear. Somehow they're making money out of that, and if people can't do that, then they're losing. I couldn't even find the figure for that, so it's probably like an astronomical number. So the reason we another reason we should care is because this time, these delays translate to actual money for our customers and for us when we're building our own products. So this is why this is very important. So when we're trying to optimize our web page, there's three areas that we can focus on. So I'm going to split the screen into three sections. First, the browser side, right? What which actually receives and sends file, and then there's the server, also receives and sends file, and the process in between, right? So we're thinking about these three different sections, how to optimize their particular their performance. Next, I'll be listing some ways we can improve performance. I want to mention that there's many ways to improve your application performance, and this is not an exhaustive list. This is just some concepts that these slides will be shared, so maybe you can take some of these concepts, research them. I'll be going at a very high level in this case. So from the browser side, we need to understand the critical render path. This is the process that the browser goes through when you request when we request a HTML when an HTML file comes to it. This is the process that it goes through in order to show a web page and paint it on the screen. Understanding this might help us understand how to optimize certain areas of it. And then we can, do some code optimization, maybe do some code splitting, something like that. And there's other new concepts like progressive web apps. This is something depends on your particular case. You might not be doing any of these, but so it depends on the case a lot of the time. Again, there's many ways. Next, we'll talk about the actual transferring. So in this case, we could minimize the text of our code or minimize the images. And finally, we can minimize delivery, and we'll talk about that more. And then from the server side, there's many things that can be done. We could use CDN, caching, load balancing, scale RDB horizontally or vertical, and then gzip. So again, don't be alarmed by all this. This is just these are concepts that I encourage everybody to read. Each of one of them could be even a course on its own or a presentation on its own. Today, I'll mainly just quickly to be focusing on this particular aspect. It's what I consider, let's say, quick wins. So let's start with minimizing text. What do we mean by that? There's many websites that actually help us with that, like Uglify.js or Uglify CSS. And I think let's look at this example here. The function, what it does is it converts the input that we give it from Celsius from Fahrenheit to Celsius, right? So as you can see, we have a name, descriptive, and then argument that descriptive, call it temperature. All this spacing, we're generous with it. We do this for humans, right? So that we can actually read our code. We need to make sure that our variables are very descriptive so that humans understand it. However, um, when I'm going to, I'm going to a web browser and I'm requesting something, the machine is reading the code. I'm not reading the code, and so we don't really need this when it comes to production. So what we can do is we can minimize the text. So in this case, as you can see, we're just calling it n. The temperature, we're calling it n. We're even calling the function n. It doesn't matter because the machine understands this. So why is this helpful? Because all these spaces take up space, make the file larger, and you'll find that although in this is a very simplified example, you might think this is minimum, but when it comes to larger files, you could be just by minimizing your text, you could be reducing the size file by up to like 40 or 60%. Next, about minimizing images. So when it comes to images, I've noticed just from my experience that this is one of the areas where a lot of the time the first area I'll go to when it comes to optimizing the speed of the page. I'll just go to the image because a lot of the time there's misuse when it comes to that, because maybe we'll download the image and just uh, use it just blindly into our application, embedded blindly into our application. So a couple things we could do to minimize our images. One is compress these images. Many services online can compress it. This is just the process of making our image smaller. It's gonna cause some performance, some quality reduction to the image, but not in a significant way. And then we could resize our images. In many cases, you'll find that image is used, however, is used, but the wrong size is set. So we use CSS to resize the image. If we have to do that, then why not just literally just resize the image and use that that image with that exact size on our page instead of having to use CSS to resize it. So we should think about that. Finally, we could use CDNs, content delivery networks. Sometimes, if you have a lot of images, a good option is to um, use a CDN just to have a server close to wherever your customers are, so that they can load faster, reach your clients faster. So there are many options when it comes to minimizing images. And finally, we'll talk about delivery, and we can look at two cases here. First, imagine this is a browser here, and this browser is requesting an HTML file, and then it's parsing through it. As it parses through it, it reaches some link tags and some script tags, and every time it gets there, it starts to request the particular either CSS or JS file. And so you can imagine if you have a lot of link tags or you have a lot of script tags, many requests are being sent and many files are being sent to your browser. Now compare that to here on the other side. No worries. Compare it to here on the other side, where the load on the one on the left is much larger than the one on the right. So we want to be able to do the one on the right instead of the left side. However, it's quite difficult because we want our code to be modular, but at the same time, and in order to combine them, we might have like 100 files. So it's very difficult. This is much more difficult than these two methods, which is minimizing image and minimizing text. Although these are also difficult. If you have 100 files, it's going to be very difficult for you to go to uglify.js and just paste in some code and then copy that and paste it somewhere, paste it back into your project. So a lot of this process is very manual, which is why I mentioned technology has advanced so much that in a lot of cases we don't have to do much because we have these bundlers. So bundlers, what they're going to do is they're going to do this for us, where they're going to take all our JS files and all our CSS files and bundle them into single JS and single CSS files. And that way minimizing the load on the browser. In fact, I'll talk about specifically Webpack. I'm more familiar with that, at least with what it does. Webpack has a very powerful plugin system where you can even compress images and resize them as well. And all of them actually, they all minimize the text, I believe, out the box. So we use bundlers whether we know it or not. If you're using React and using Create React app, Webpack is being used in the background. And so it's a very important technology that we should know about. So just to reiterate some of the key areas we should be thinking about when it comes to improving performance of our web pages. And feel free to, I would recommend everybody read about, at least get a general idea about all these concepts. But yeah, that's just what I wanted to talk about today. I just wanted to have us just thinking about web performance at a higher level, and then from there, I hope this is like a starting point for people to read about some of these concepts, because even for me, like I learned a lot, and I'm planning on reading even further about these concepts. But yeah, that is my talk. Thank you. Any questions?
Well, thank you very much for that. Yeah, this is something that I've been thinking about. You can ask Hajar and Ahad. I've been harping on about this, starting with our own website, which they actually did some work on.
Great.
I think the first question I have is around like, how do we work this into our project delivery methodology? Like, how do we make sure that this is part of the process of every single project? I guess that would be sort of my main question. And I guess my second question would be around, it seems like there's some trade-offs to be made there. I don't know if you have any commentary on that. So we talked about like, that the uglify or whatever, unuglify thing, where basically, you sort of make it, to me, the trade-off seems like it's less intuitive in terms of like, let's say variable names. Does that not add layers of complexity later when you want to go debug? And the same thing with, slimming down from multiple CSS files and JS files where you have the modularity. And then when you sort of put it into a single file, yes, less load on the server, but more load on the human. Is my understanding correct, or?
Yeah. So I'll answer the second one first, which is you were saying, and I'm just going to repeat it in case. So just to make sure that I understand. So you're saying there's a trade-off for using this type of for writing our code this way, transforming our code to this, right?
Correct.
Because now it's not humanly readable. Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Well, it's less intuitive. I mean, you could figure it out, but it's just less intuitive.
Less intuitive. That is true. But that's why, like, the way we're gonna write our code is this way, right? Where things are clear and obvious, and where plenty of spaces and everything. What this code ideally should only be seen by the computer. This is not code that we should be reading. And in fact, in many of our projects, we'll be using these bundlers, and they're just going to do it for us. And what's going to end up happening is we're going to have a build directory or build folder, and that build folder is where all this production code is going to live.
Okay, got it.
Right? So we're not going to be going into that build folder. We're just sending that to our server, and our server is going to send that to, yeah. So that's kind of. And then you mentioned how we're going to be. Can you repeat the?
Yeah. So the first question. So what are the implications on our project delivery in terms of like how do we be more direct, and how do we implement this? How do we embed this into the way that we deliver projects to ensure that we're addressing a lot of these approaches to ensuring good performance?
Well, I'll just say, and I think there's the part that I took, for example, which is this in the center, the transferring. This is the most direct way, and let's say quick win way to deal with that. So we should be making sure that at least this happens for each project. We could have maybe a document, an engineering standard that acts like a checklist for certain items here. That could be an option, at least a start for that. So that's how I'm thinking. But it's a how do you say? It's a much bigger scope so that we can have a process that we all follow. But I think a start is a document, maybe an engineering standard.
Okay. So we'll get on that.
Yeah. I'll note that.
Can I interfere a bit in here? Hello?
Sure.
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
For a question, Mr. Masoud, the process of minimizing the text, the images, the delivery, and all improving the performance is thought of in the architecture of the project. So when we set up the project when we start setup in the project, we add the bundles, we add the plugins that help us minimize everything. So when we start developing, everything is done in the backend, so we don't care about it. So it's all about how we
Okay.
plan it in first, and when you start the project.
Okay.
Yeah, so he just mentioned something important actually, which actually relates to also your first question about how we're gonna be applying it. We're gonna eventually be right now we're working with Will on a document about our tech stack. It eventually will get to also how we're building a React application. Our architecture will have ideally all this set up with these bundlers, with one of these bundlers here. So what he said
Okay.
also answers your first question, which is we can have this set up by default by having our go-to, let's say, a project starter be configured.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
all depending on the technology we're using. So
Yeah.
there are different bundles for each technology and all.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's interesting. So you can actually do it on the front end and sort of essentially forget about it, knowing that it's effectively taken care of.
Exactly. For example, you can see for the WPA websites, it's all about installing one dependency at first, and everything then goes right. All you need to do is make sure that the images you're using are optimized well, while you
Mhm.
also can do it automatically by adding a dependency that optimizes
Yeah.
images.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a way to do all this without even just having the configuration for it. One second.
Okay.
All at least this part. So we'll make sure that when we start our project, we're thinking about this already.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, there is another way of thinking of it. For example, we can avoid the entire process of fixing or setting the optimization or the performance improving dependencies using a stack that already do it built in. You see.
Mm,
So, for example, when we talk about websites, we can use Gatsby or GS, which depend on not on connecting with the servers and all. So all they have to do is take your code and build it, render it, then put it as a static website renders. So everything is optimized by the stack itself, by the framework itself.
mhm. Yeah, and that's something. Well, I'll say that's something maybe we should discuss as we're building the document for it in engineering standards. So maybe I'll reach out to you, Rove, right? You're the one talking, because I can't see. Yeah, so maybe I'll reach out to you because right now I'm working with Will on drafting that document. So maybe yeah, I'll reach out to you on that.
Sure, sure.
All right. Any other questions?
Salim, any thoughts?
Yeah, hello Maher, thank you for this topic. Just I have doubts with this three case in this slide, the critical render path. Could you please explain it again? What you mean by critical render path?
Yeah, so I can explain it. It's basically I'll explain it in a general way, and then if you want, I can even show an illustration of it. It's basically the what happens after we request and we get our HTML. What's the process that the browser goes through to paint the page, right? I can let me show an illustration real quick. Real quick. And I'm actually gonna share in the engineering standard the MDN link to this because I think it's an important concept. So maybe let me see. There's one that I always go to. Okay, this one. So you see here we're requesting the page, and then we start to build the DOM. This is the process of parsing through the HTML. Whenever it gets to a link tag, it will get the HTML CSS, and anytime it gets to a script tag, it will get fetch the JS file, and meanwhile continuing to build the DOM, and then eventually builds the CSS DOM, and then so yeah, it's basically the process that the browser goes through up to it gets to the point where it renders the page. So it's a much deeper concept. I'm gonna put something in engineering standard, and I'm gonna share it with everybody.
Great. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
All right. Anfal, any questions?
Not really.
All right. I guess we can wrap up.
Okay.
Thank you very much for that, Matt. Really appreciate it. Looking forward to some of the resources that you're going to share. And hopefully some interesting discussions later in the week after I do some reading around the subject too.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah. Anytime I share resources, they're all going to be in engineering standards, and I'll let the team know.
Excellent. All right. Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you all for your time.